I was folding clothes in my bedroom when my son rushed in, breathing hard like he had been running. He didn't explain anything. He just pressed a small red note into my hand and said, "Don't open it now. Go pack everything fast." His voice shook in a way I had never heard. The last time I'd felt fear like that was years ago in New York City when I got lost in a crowded station. But this was worse, much worse. Something in his eyes told me my whole life was about to change. If you're watching this, please like the video and subscribe. I still remember the moment he placed that red note in my hand. It was small, folded tightly, almost too warm from how hard he had been holding it. His face looked pale, like he had seen something terrible, something no mother ever wants her child to see. He didn't explain anything. He didn't give me time to think. He just pressed the note into my palm and told me to go pack everything fast. I froze for a second, trying to understand why my grown son, who had always been calm and steady, was now shaking like a leaf. For a moment, I wondered if it was some kind of joke, but the fear in his eyes told me it wasn't. I stood there in the hallway, watching him rush from room to room, checking windows, locking the back door, and staring through the peephole as if someone might already be outside. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to ask him what was wrong, why we had to pack, what danger we were in, but I could tell he wouldn't answer. I had never seen him like this. My son, who always thought before he acted, was now moving fast, almost frantic. It scared me more than the silence. The house felt smaller, darker suddenly, like the walls were closing in. Every step I took felt heavy. I looked down at the red note in my hand, tempted to open it right there. But he told me not to. He insisted I wait. That alone made me nervous. Why couldn't I read it now? What was so important that it had to stay closed until later? I kept imagining the worst. Maybe someone was after him. Maybe someone was after both of us. Maybe he had discovered something dangerous. My mind raced with fears I had never allowed myself to think about before. I went to my bedroom and opened my closet, pulling out my old suitcase. As I packed my clothes, my hands trembled. I didn't know what I was packing for. A trip, an escape, a permanent move. I didn't even know if we would ever come back. Each folded shirt felt like a goodbye. I kept glancing at the door, waiting for my son to run in and tell me everything was a misunderstanding, that we weren't in danger, that I didn't need to worry. But he didn't. Instead, I heard drawers opening and closing, the sound of him gathering things quickly, quietly, with purpose. It felt like the whole house was holding its breath. Every little noise suddenly sounded louder. The hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, even the faint wind outside. I felt like someone could burst through the door at any minute. I kept my suitcase close to me, as if holding it would somehow protect me. I tried to stay calm, but the fear kept growing. When I walked down the hallway again, I saw my son staring out the window, checking the street. He looked tense, as if he expected a car to pull up or someone to appear. He kept wiping his palms on his jeans, a habit he had since childhood whenever he felt overwhelmed. I wanted to hug him, tell him everything would be okay, but I knew I needed answers first. And the only answer I had was still sitting folded in my hand. I looked at that red paper again, so small, but suddenly heavier than anything I had ever carried. I wondered what words were inside. A warning? A confession? A secret? Why red? Was it a message of danger? My stomach twisted at the thought. The more I packed, the more I felt like I had been blind for weeks, maybe months. I remembered the strange looks he had given me lately, the nights he stayed awake longer than usual, the way he jumped whenever the phone rang. I had asked him if he was okay, and he always said everything was fine. Now I realized he had been hiding something from me, something big, something he thought might destroy us if he didn't act fast. When I finally zipped up my suitcase, the house felt too quiet, too still, as if time had slowed down around us. My son walked in, his voice low, telling me it was time to go. I nodded, but my hands were shaking too much to pick up the suitcase. It felt like my whole life was changing, and I didn't even know why. I took one last look around the room, feeling a wave of sadness, not knowing if I would ever see this place again. I followed him out the door, the red note still pressed against my palm. I didn't open it. Not yet. But every step I took felt heavier, knowing that whatever was inside that folded paper was about to change everything. And deep down, I already sensed the truth. Whatever my son discovered, whatever he was trying to protect me from, was something that would break my heart. When I followed my son into the hallway, I felt fear crawling up my spine. I kept asking him what was happening, but he would not tell me anything. His face stayed tense, and his eyes kept moving toward the front door, as if he was waiting for something or someone. The silence between us felt heavy, almost too heavy to breathe through. I wanted to grab his arms and force him to tell me the truth, but he kept distance between us, standing stiff, guarded, and strangely cold. I had never seen him like this. It felt as if he was hiding more than just a simple problem. I could sense worry in the way he shifted his weight and kept glancing toward the windows, like he was checking if someone was watching. The tension grew stronger with every second. He wasn't acting like my son. He wasn't the gentle man I had raised, the boy who once cried when he heard a bird, the man who used to sit beside me when I was sick. Instead, he looked like someone on the edge of panic, someone who knew something terrible and didn't know how to shield me from it. I felt torn between trust and fear. A part of me wanted to believe he was protecting me. Another part whispered that he was hiding something so big that he feared what would happen if I found out too soon. When I tried again to ask what the red note meant, he didn't speak. He only stared at me with eyes full of worry, frustration, and something I couldn't name. Maybe guilt. His silence felt harsher than any words he could have said. It made me question everything around me, everything in our home, everything in our past. Suddenly, I wondered if the danger was already here, or if it was coming closer with each passing second. The house felt too quiet, too still, as if it was holding its breath along with us. He kept repeating that I had to pack fast and that I needed to trust him. But those words only made me more afraid. Trust comes easily when life is normal. But when your son looks like he is preparing for a disaster he refuses to explain, trust becomes a struggle. My heart raced as I walked back to my room, but before I left the hallway, I saw him clench his fists tightly. The worry on his face deepened, and he looked toward the door again. His behavior felt like a warning, like something big was just outside our control. I had raised him, cared for him, and held him during hard times. But in that moment, I realized he was keeping me away from something he did not want me to face alone. I felt betrayed, confused, and scared. The silence between us stretched like a tight rope, fragile and ready to snap. His refusal to explain made me question if someone had threatened him, or if he had done something that forced him into this strange, tense state. The fear in his eyes wasn't small. It was deep, heavy, and frightening. And seeing my own son look like that broke something inside me. I wanted to hug him and tell him that whatever he was hiding, we could face it together. But he would not let me near him. He stepped back every time I moved forward, as if protecting me required distance. I watched him walk to the window and peek outside with a seriousness that made my knees weak. His shoulders were tense, and every movement looked cautious, like he expected someone to appear at any moment. The longer I watched, the clearer it became. This wasn't something simple. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was something dangerous, something real, something that frightened him enough to push me away instead of pulling me closer. And knowing that made the fear inside me grow even stronger. He tried to smile, but it was a stiff, broken expression, the kind people make when they're trying to hide fear. That cold tension between us thickened, wrapping around the room, making the air feel heavy. I wanted to scream at him to tell me everything. I wanted to shake him until he opened the truth. But I also knew that pushing him might break whatever fragile plan he had in place. So instead, I stood there in silence, watching him, wondering what truth could be so big, so dangerous, that my own son felt he had to hide it behind a red note and an order to run. In that moment, I realized something painful. He wasn't just trying to protect me. He was also trying to protect himself. and whatever secret he was hiding was big enough to destroy us both if handled the wrong way. I sat on the edge of my bed that night, the red note still hidden deep inside my purse, and my mind went back over the last few months like a slow, painful rewind. Things had not been normal in our home for a long time, but I had pushed those signs aside the way mothers do when they think their children are simply stressed or tired or growing distant for ordinary reasons. Now, with the memory of my son's urgent voice still fresh, I could see everything clearly. The truth was there all along. I just never connected the pieces until this moment. I remembered the first sign, the phone calls he took outside. For years, he never hid anything from me. He would talk openly about his friends, his work, his plans. But then, one day, he began stepping outside to take calls. Always outside, always speaking in a low voice, pacing the porch as if he did not want me to hear even a single word. When I asked who it was, he simply said it was nothing important, and I let it go. I thought maybe he wanted his privacy. Now I knew there was more, much more. Then there were the letters, small envelopes tucked into the pockets of his jackets, his drawers, even the glove box of his car. The return addresses were always different, some written in messy handwriting, others typed neatly. When I asked him once about a letter I saw on the counter, he grabbed it too fast, almost nervous, and said it was work stuff. I assumed maybe he had debts he did not want to talk about. I never imagined the possibility that these letters carried warnings, instructions, or secrets linked to danger, betrayal, or something much darker. I remembered the day he came home late, long after midnight. His clothes were damp from sweat, his hands shaking. I asked if he was all right. He said he had a long night at work, but he wasn't dressed for work. He wore the old sweatshirt he usually put on when he needed to run somewhere quickly. That same night, I heard him crying quietly in the bathroom. I stood outside the door, wanting to knock, wanting to ask what was wrong, but something inside me told me to stay silent. That silence became a habit. Now it felt like a mistake. There were also the arguments he had with someone over the phone, not shouting fights, more like sharp, tense whispers. I often heard him say things like, "Not now," "I can't tell her," and "Give me some time." Each time I walked into the room, he quickly ended the call, acting as if nothing had happened. At the time, I thought he was protecting me from stress. But now I could see the truth. He had been protecting me from something far bigger than stress. Another memory hit me sharply, the box in his closet. I found it by accident while sorting laundry. It was taped shut, labeled only with a date written in thick black marker. I asked him about it, but he became defensive and took the box from me without explanation. I never saw that box again. Tonight, I realized that the box may have held documents, warnings, or items that were part of the reason he had given me that red note. Then I remembered the sudden change in his behavior around my husband. The tension between them grew quietly but steadily. He avoided him, spoke less, and kept his distance. At dinner, he watched my husband closely, as if studying him. When my husband entered the room, my son sometimes went silent mid-sentence. I knew something was wrong, but as a mother, I tried to keep peace. I convinced myself they were just having a disagreement. But now, looking back, the fear in my son's eyes made sense. He was watching my husband because he did not trust him, or maybe because he was afraid of him. There was also the morning he told me he had changed the locks on the garage. He said it was for safety. He said there had been break-ins around the neighborhood, but no one else had heard of any break-ins. And later, I found him in the garage, sitting on a chair, staring at a stack of documents with a serious expression. When I approached, he quickly hid the papers behind him. That same week, he installed a small safe in his room, saying he needed it for personal items. I did not question him. Now I wished I did. One memory stood out more than all the rest. The day he hugged me tightly. Too tightly, as if he feared it might be the last time. I felt his body shake, and I asked what was wrong. He said he just needed a hug. But his eyes looked tired, older, full of weight he was carrying alone. Tonight, sitting on my bed, I finally understood. That hug was a warning, a farewell, or a silent apology for everything he knew would come. All these small signs had built up, little pieces that seemed harmless at the time, but now formed a clear picture. My son had been trying to protect me from something real, something dangerous, something connected to that red note. And the moment he pressed that note into my hands, telling me to pack fast, was the moment all the clues suddenly aligned. I finally understood. Whatever was happening, it had been happening for a long time. I sat on the edge of my bed that night, the red note still hidden deep inside my purse, and my mind went back over the last few months like a slow, painful rewind. Things had not been normal in our home for a long time, but I had pushed those signs aside the way mothers do when they think their children are simply stressed or tired or growing distant for ordinary reasons. Now, with the memory of my son's urgent voice still fresh, I could see everything clearly. The truth was there all along. I just never connected the pieces until this moment. I remembered the first sign, the phone calls he took outside. For years, he never hid anything from me. He would talk openly about his friends, his work, his plans. But then, one day, he began stepping outside to take calls. Always outside. Always speaking in a low voice, pacing the porch as if he did not want me to hear even a single word. When I asked who it was, he simply said it was nothing important, and I let it go. I thought maybe he wanted his privacy. Now I knew there was more, much more. Then there were the letters, small envelopes tucked into the pockets of his jackets, his drawers, even the glove box of his car. The return addresses were always different. Some written in messy handwriting, others typed neatly. When I asked him once about a letter I saw on the counter, he grabbed it too fast, almost nervous, and said it was work stuff. I assumed maybe he had debts he did not want to talk about. I never imagined the possibility that these letters carried warnings, instructions, or secrets linked to danger, betrayal, or something much darker. I remembered the day he came home late, long after midnight. His clothes were damp from sweat, his hands shaking. I asked if he was all right. He said he had a long night at work, but he wasn't dressed for work. He wore the old sweatshirt he usually put on when he needed to run somewhere quickly. That same night, I heard him crying quietly in the bathroom. I stood outside the door, wanting to knock, wanting to ask what was wrong. But something inside me told me to stay silent. That silence became a habit. Now it felt like a mistake. There were also the arguments he had with someone over the phone. Not shouting fights, more like sharp, tense whispers. I often heard him say things like, "Not now," "I can't tell her," and "Give me some time." Each time I walked into the room, he quickly ended the call, acting as if nothing had happened. At the time, I thought he was protecting me from stress, but now I could see the truth. He had been protecting me from something far bigger than stress. Another memory hit me sharply: the box in his closet. I found it by accident while sorting laundry. It was taped shut, labeled only with a date written in thick black marker. I asked him about it, but he became defensive and took the box from me without explanation. I never saw that box again. Tonight, I realized that the box may have held documents, warnings, or items that were part of the reason he had given me that red note. Then I remembered the sudden change in his behavior around my husband. The tension between them grew quietly but steadily. He avoided him, spoke less, and kept his distance. At dinner, he watched my husband closely, as if studying him. When my husband entered the room, my son sometimes went silent mid-sentence. I knew something was wrong, but as a mother, I tried to keep peace. I convinced myself they were just having a disagreement. But now, looking back, the fear in my son's eyes made sense. He was watching my husband because he did not trust him, or maybe because he was afraid of him. There was also the morning he told me he had changed the locks on the garage. He said it was for safety. He said there had been break-ins around the neighborhood, but no one else had heard of any break-ins. And later, I found him in the garage, sitting on a chair, staring at a stack of documents with a serious expression. When I approached, he quickly hid the papers behind him. That same week, he installed a small safe in his room, saying he needed it for personal items. I did not question him. Now I wished I did. One memory stood out more than all the rest. The day he hugged me tightly, too tightly, as if he feared it might be the last time. I felt his body shake, and I asked what was wrong. He said he just needed a hug, but his eyes looked tired, older, full of weight he was carrying alone. Tonight, sitting on my bed, I finally understood. That hug was a warning, a farewell, or a silent apology for everything he knew would come. All these small signs had built up, little pieces that seemed harmless at the time, but now formed a clear picture. My son had been trying to protect me from something real, something dangerous, something connected to that red note. And the moment he pressed that note into my hands, telling me to pack fast, was the moment all the clues suddenly aligned. I finally understood. Whatever was happening, it had been happening for a long time. The moment my son told me to go now, something inside my chest tightened in a way I had not felt in years. It wasn't just fear. It was the feeling that someone I loved was trying to protect me from something very real. His voice was urgent, sharp, almost shaking, and it wasn't the voice of the little boy I had raised. It was the voice of a man who knew danger was close. I saw his hands tremble a little, his eyes scanning the house like he expected someone to burst through the door at any moment. That alone filled my whole body with panic, because my son was not the type to scare easily. He had always been calm, steady, and careful. But now he looked like someone who had been carrying a secret so heavy that one wrong move could break everything open. I tried to ask again what was happening, but he didn't let me speak. He pressed his hand gently on my shoulder and said, "Mom, please." That one word, please, was enough to tell me whatever danger we were facing wasn't small. It wasn't imagined. It wasn't something that could wait even 5 more minutes. My fingers fumbled as I reached for the nearest bag. My mind raced as I stuffed clothes inside without even folding them. My breath grew short, like I couldn't get enough air, and I kept glancing down the hall expecting something or someone to show up. Every tiny sound, the creak of the floor, the hum of the refrigerator, the wind hitting the window, made me jump like I was hearing footsteps. While I packed, he moved quickly through the house, grabbing documents, closing drawers, checking locks, unplugging devices. It was like he had prepared himself for this moment long before he ever handed me that red note. That scared me even more. This wasn't something that happened suddenly. This wasn't a small issue. This was something he had been bracing himself for, planning for, expecting to happen. And I, his own mother, had been in the dark the entire time. The thought made my stomach twist. Was someone after him? After us? Was someone watching the house? Every window suddenly looked suspicious. Every shadow felt alive. Every second felt like 1 second too long. I tried to calm myself, reminding my heart to slow down, but nothing helped. The urgency in his eyes kept replaying inside my head. He stopped for a moment and pressed his ear against the front door, listening, not breathing, not blinking, listening, and that scared me more than anything else. He wasn't paranoid, he was prepared. That was the difference. Paranoia is fear without reason. Preparation is fear backed by truth. And the way he stood there, tense and silent, told me the truth was close, maybe right outside. When he turned around, his face was pale, but his voice was firm. "Mom, take your bag. We're leaving in 5 minutes." I nodded, unable to speak. My hands shook so badly I could barely zip the suitcase. I kept asking myself why we had to leave, why he couldn't tell me, why everything felt like it was falling apart. But the more I thought, the more I realized something. The red note wasn't just a warning. It was a plan. A plan my son had been forced to create on his own because he believed I needed protecting. I checked my purse again, my phone, my wallet, my medicine. I felt old suddenly, slower, more vulnerable. I wasn't used to running from anything. I wasn't used to packing in fear. I wasn't used to trusting someone else with my safety, but my son wasn't that little kid anymore. He was a grown man who looked like he had seen something terrible, and he was still choosing to protect me, even if it meant dragging me out of the house in the middle of the night without an explanation. When he came back into the room, he grabbed my suitcase for me, his jaw tight. "Mom, please, don't ask questions. Not right now." I nodded again because asking questions wouldn't matter. Not tonight. Tonight was about leaving. Tonight was about survival. Tonight was about trusting the one person who clearly knew more than I did. My chest felt heavy, like it was sinking deeper and deeper. I had lived in that house for decades. I had cooked in that kitchen, laughed in that living room, raised my children in those rooms. And now I was walking out without knowing if I would ever come back. I didn't say goodbye to anything. I didn't touch the photos on the wall. I didn't stop to breathe in the memories. I only followed my son because he was moving like he knew something I didn't. As we stepped toward the door, he grabbed my hand, tight, protective, desperate. And that was the moment the full weight of the danger hit me. Whatever waited outside wasn't just trouble. It was something powerful enough to make my son fear for my life. And all I could do was hold on and trust him. Hold on and run. When I finally had a moment alone, I sat on the edge of the motel bed and pulled out the red note my son had forced into my hands. My fingers shook as I opened it, the paper soft from being held too tightly. The handwriting was rushed, almost messy, as if he wrote it while looking over his shoulder. The first line made my stomach twist. "Mom, someone you trust is planning something against you." I read it twice, trying to calm my breathing, but each word felt like a blow. My eyes moved slowly down the page, and the next sentence hit harder. "You need to leave the house before he finds out what I discovered." I felt the room spin as I tried to make sense of it. He hadn't said who he was, but deep down, a terrible suspicion began growing inside me. My husband, my partner of so many years, the man I thought would protect me from the world, not push me out of it. Memories flooded my mind. The quiet phone calls he took outside, the long nights he spent in the garage, the locked drawer he never let me near. At the time, I ignored the signs because I didn't want to see them. But now, with this red note in my hand, every ignored detail came back like a wave crashing over me. The note continued, explaining that my son had overheard conversations, seen papers, and found things hidden in the office desk. "Mom, he's planning to move things under your name. You need to leave before he makes you look guilty." My heart dropped. My own husband setting me up. I wanted to deny it, but the fear in my son's eyes earlier was real. He wasn't the type to create drama or panic. If he told me to run, it meant danger was closer than I ever imagined. I kept reading, feeling each word cut deeper. My son wrote that he didn't have time to explain everything before we left the house. He said he had discovered financial documents, forged signatures, and a plan that involved shifting blame onto me. "He thinks no one will question him," the note said. "He thinks you're too quiet, too trusting. He thinks you won't fight." I felt tears rise, but I forced them back because the next part demanded my full attention. My son wrote that he found a safe in the garage with files naming me as the responsible party for debts and investments I never made. He wrote that he had confronted my husband one night, but my husband told him he should mind his own business. That was the night my son decided he had to act. He knew if he didn't pull me out quickly, something irreversible would happen. My hands shook harder as I continued reading. There was a second section at the bottom of the note, the part that broke me the most. My son apologized. He said he was sorry for frightening me, sorry for making me leave so suddenly, sorry for dragging me into chaos. But he also wrote that he wasn't going to let me be blamed for something I didn't do. The note said, "Mom, I know you always protected me. This time, it's my turn to protect you." I pressed the paper to my chest, feeling a mix of heartbreak and pride. My son, who had always been gentle, quiet, and observant, had carried this heavy knowledge alone until he couldn't anymore. But the final lines were the ones that shook me to my core. The person you fear most is not a stranger. It's the one who promised to love you. Don't go back home alone. Don't trust his apologies. And don't let him know what I found. Reading those words made everything feel painfully real. My marriage had cracks I didn't see, secrets I didn't hear, and threats I didn't feel. But my son saw them all. He had been watching, silently protecting me in ways I never knew. By the time I reached the end of the note, I felt like the world I had known had shifted. My son's desperate handwriting, the rushed warning, the truth behind the secrecy, it all painted a picture I couldn't ignore. I wasn't just leaving the house for a night. I was escaping something much darker. I folded the note carefully, placing it inside my purse, like a fragile truth I needed to guard. My son had risked everything to save me, and now I had to find out just how deep this betrayal ran, and who else might be tangled in it. When I reached him that evening, the weight of the entire day pressed down on my chest. I stood in the doorway of the small room he had been using, clutching the red note, the truth, and every fear I had carried since morning. He looked up slowly, as if he already knew this moment was coming. The lamp beside him cast a soft glow across his face, making him look older, worn, and exhausted. For a moment, I almost forgot he was the one who had pushed me into chaos. But then I remembered the handwriting on the note, the truth it carried, and all the signs I had ignored. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. There was no turning back. He opened his mouth to speak, but I lifted a hand to stop him. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady. I told him I had read every word inside the red note. I told him I knew about the danger. I knew about the betrayal, and I knew how long he had been carrying that heavy truth without saying a word to me. His face changed instantly. Shock, guilt, fear, all passing through him like fast-moving shadows. He tried to say he wanted to protect me, but I wasn't ready to accept any excuses. Not yet. I laid everything out on the table, the missing documents, the unusual withdrawals from my accounts, the hidden conversations, the sudden secrecy he thought I didn't notice. I told him I had pieced it all together. I had spoken to people. I had looked through the papers he tried to hide. I had seen the messages he thought he deleted. I knew he was keeping something huge from me, not out of selfishness, but out of desperation and fear. He lowered his eyes slowly, unable to deny a single thing. For the first time, he looked like a child again, not a grown man trying to pretend he could handle every storm alone. He took a deep breath and whispered that he hadn't wanted to burden me, that he had hoped to fix everything before involving me. But the problem had spiraled far beyond what he could manage. He admitted he was being threatened. He admitted someone was watching the house. And he admitted the money missing from my account wasn't stolen. It was taken to protect me. I stared at him in disbelief, trying to absorb each confession. My mind raced, but my voice remained firm. I asked him why he thought hiding everything from me was better than standing beside me and facing it together. His eyes filled with tears, and he whispered that he didn't want me to be hurt again. He didn't want me to feel the same fear I once felt years ago. He said he still remembered the night when everything almost fell apart, the night that changed our family forever. He promised himself he would never allow me to go through anything like that again. His pain felt real. His words felt heavy, but it didn't erase the danger we were in now. So I gave him an ultimatum, one he didn't expect. I told him we were done with secrets. I told him if he wanted to save me, he had to trust me first. I told him I was not leaving that room until he told me the full truth, every detail, every threat, every name. I told him if he hesitated, even for a second, I would go straight to the police, the lawyer, and anyone else who could help me, with or without him. The shock on his face was clear. He wasn't used to me taking control. He wasn't used to me setting the terms. The room went silent. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my hands. For a moment, I wondered if he would walk away again or shut down like before. But instead, he took a deep breath and nodded slowly. He finally understood that keeping me in the dark didn't protect me. It only made things worse. He admitted that he needed me, not just as a mother, not as someone to hide from danger, but as someone strong enough to face the truth with him. And so he began to talk, and once he started, he couldn't stop. He told me everything he had kept hidden, the threats, the people demanding money, the mistake he made that pulled him into something dangerous, and the reason he gave me that red note. As he spoke, the truth shattered me, piece by piece, but I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't cry. I needed to hear it all before deciding what came next. By the time he finished, the room felt heavier than ever, but something had shifted. For the first time, we were finally on the same side of the truth. The ultimatum had worked. And now, together, we had to decide what to do next, because running was no longer an option, and neither was silence. When the truth finally came together, everything in my life shifted at once. The red note my son had given me, the secret rush to pack, the fear in his eyes. It all made sense when the full truth stood in front of me without shadows or confusion. The danger he had tried to protect me from was real and deeper than I had imagined. I learned that there had been a plan against me involving money, property, and my personal documents. Someone close to our family had been gathering information about me, trying to gain access to my savings, my home, and even parts of my identity. My son had discovered this and knew he did not have time to explain everything safely, so he forced me to leave before anything worse could happen. It was not just fear, it was urgency shaped by the knowledge that delay could cost me everything. When I finally understood this, a strange mix of relief and heartbreak washed over me. I was relieved to know that my son acted from love, not cruelty, but I felt heartbroken knowing someone near us had built a plan to betray me. I realized how easily trust can be weakened by a single wrong person in your circle. The danger was not something I ever thought would come into my life at my age. I lived simple days, quiet routines, and trusted the people around me. Yet behind my back, someone had studied my habits, watched my movements, and tried to predict my weaknesses. The red note was not a warning created from fear. It was a shield created in desperation. My son used the fastest, safest way to protect me because he knew that a conversation would take too long and might put both of us in harm's way. After we met with the lawyer and shared every detail, the legal steps began. Every document in the note was reviewed. Every name, date, and paper connected pieces of the plan against me. My lawyer took each page seriously and explained how close I had come to losing everything. The note included bank account numbers, a copy of a false signature that someone had practiced, and even a copy of a letter written as if it were from me. Someone had been preparing to take control of my home through fraud, using my trust and age as a weakness to exploit. My heart felt heavy as I listened, but I also felt grateful that my son had acted when he did. The more we uncovered, the clearer the truth became. This betrayal did not happen overnight. It had been growing quietly, hidden behind smiles, polite conversations, and false respect. My son had seen the signs before I did. Unusual visitors, strange questions, missing papers in my drawer. He tried to handle it quietly at first, hoping it was a misunderstanding. But when he learned the final piece of the plan, that someone wanted me out of my own house so they could claim it, he did not wait another second. That was the moment he wrote the red note. I understood then how much he must have feared what could happen if he told me too soon or too late. The consequence for the person behind the plan was swift and serious. With the help of the lawyer and the documents my son saved, legal action began immediately. The person responsible was confronted with the evidence and had no space left to deny it. Their actions were exposed fully, leaving them without protection. The law stepped in to freeze any attempts to use my identity or access my accounts. Every false document was destroyed, every fraudulent request canceled. The house and all my assets were secured. My safety was treated as a priority by the authorities, and further restrictions were placed to ensure I would not be threatened again. As the truth spread among the people who knew us, the person behind the betrayal faced social and legal consequences. Their reputation fell apart as others learned what they had tried to do. My quiet life, which they thought they could take advantage of, became the reason people supported me and turned against them. They were forced to back away from our family completely, knowing the law and community were watching. The peace I had feared would disappear was slowly restored as each barrier of protection was put into place. In the end, the urgency my son had shown proved to be the reason my life remained safe. The fast packing, the silent fear, the sudden move, it all brought me to a place where I could see the truth clearly and protect myself before everything fell apart. I realized that sometimes we do not understand the reasons behind someone's actions until the danger has passed. And when the truth does arrive, it changes not just our understanding of the moment, but our understanding of trust, family, and the world itself. When everything finally settled and the danger had passed, I found myself sitting alone in the quiet of my new living room. The boxes were still stacked against the walls, half opened, half forgotten, but my mind was not on unpacking. My mind kept returning to that red note my son had placed in my hands, the urgency in his voice and the fear behind his eyes. I replayed every second over and over, trying to understand how a single moment could rewrite an entire life. I had lived decades believing stability came from routine, honesty, and keeping the peace. Yet in just a few hours, I learned that everything I depended on could be ripped away without warning. I thought about the danger he had protected me from, the financial fraud happening behind my back, the forged documents in my name, the plans made without my knowledge. The idea that someone close to me had tried to use my identity, my home, and my savings without a second thought shook me to my core. I kept asking myself how long it had been going on, how many clues had I missed, how many times had I brushed off something small because I wanted to avoid conflict? At my age, you want peace more than anything, but peace built on avoiding the truth is never real peace. I learned that the hard way. There were moments, sitting in the dim light of the lamp, when guilt crept in. I wondered if my son had felt alone, trying to handle everything. I wondered if I had been too trusting, too soft, too willing to believe the best in people who did not deserve it. But each time that guilt surfaced, I reminded myself, my son protected me. He acted fast because he knew I was in danger. His choices may have been abrupt and terrifying, but they came from love. And as a mother, that meant more to me than any apology or explanation. I also thought about how much it hurt to realize that people I trusted had been planning things behind my back. Not strangers, family, people who knew my habits, my weaknesses, my routines, people who knew exactly when I was vulnerable. That betrayal cut deeper than I could ever explain. It wasn't just about money or documents. It was about trust, the kind you spend a lifetime building. It made me question everything I thought I knew about the people in my life. But with that pain came clarity. The red note forced me to see the truth. Silence had allowed wrong things to grow. My fear of confrontation had given others the space to betray me. And I realized that age does not take away your strength. Sometimes it reveals it. When you have lived long enough, you understand that survival often depends on courage, not comfort. I learned the importance of preparation. I met with lawyers, updated my documents, secured my accounts, and rebuilt my life piece by piece. I learned that knowledge is protection, that keeping everything private is not always wise. My son told me later that he feared telling me the truth because he didn't want to break my heart, but I told him the real heartbreak would have come from being blindsided. Honesty, even when painful, is a form of love, and secrets, even when meant to protect, can grow into shadows that swallow the whole family. In the weeks that followed, I also discovered something else: resilience. I found strength I didn't know I still had. I made decisions with firmness. I set boundaries where I previously stayed quiet, and I didn't feel guilty for it. Growing older doesn't mean fading away. It means finally understanding who you are and refusing to accept less than you deserve. When I looked at my son afterward, stronger, calmer, No longer hiding anything, I felt proud, not just of him, but of us. We survived something heavy, something that could have broken us completely. Instead, it pulled us closer. It reminded me that trust, once rebuilt honestly, can become even stronger than before. Some nights, I still pick up the red note and read the words again. Don't open it now. Go pack everything fast. Every time, I feel the same shiver run through me. Fear, confusion, then gratitude. That note saved my life, not just physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally. It forced me to wake up, to protect myself, to stand tall even when I felt weak. And now, when I reflect on everything, I ask myself the same question I know many others would. Was my son right to hide the truth at first? Should he have told me everything sooner? I don't know. But I do know this: we can never predict how people will act under pressure. We can only choose to face the truth when it finally reaches us. My final lesson is simple. Trust carefully, protect your peace, and never ignore the small signs. Sometimes the people we love carry heavy secrets because they are trying to shield us from pain. But love and truth must eventually meet, and when they do, the strength you find in yourself will surprise you.